Hi friends, welcome back to our YouTube channel, Cricket 24/7 with CJ. And it's a huge privilege and honor to have Michael Wagener with us on our show today. He's just joined us way back from Auckland, New Zealand. And it's a really, really great opportunity to have some discussion around cricket with him. He's a cricket analyst who discusses cricket every now and then. If you follow his Twitter profile, you'll be able to see the tweets and the analysis that he does about cricket. So it's a huge privilege to have him on our show today. Michael, first of all, welcome to our show. Have you seen any of the videos on Cricket 24/7 with CJ prior to this, or this is the first time on our show?
It's the first time on your show. I think I've seen a little bit of a couple of them, but there's a lot of cricket shows out there.
Thank you so much, for taking out some time and joining us today, because I'm sure it's going to be a really wonderful discussion. Especially, we'll try to base this around New Zealand cricket, because there are a lot of spectators in India, a lot of fans in India who know very little about New Zealand cricket. Like, they do follow them whenever the cricket matches are there, and they see the games. But then the history, the background, and the kind of hard work that has gone into making the New Zealand team what it is, I'm sure you will be able to give a better review and a better idea to the Indian fans as well. So I'm sure they might not be aware of that till now, but it's a real opportunity to have you on our show today, Michael.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we'll be starting on to all the viewers who have joined us. Just a brief messaging to all of them. Like, in case you want to ask any question to Michael, and if you want to share your views or thoughts, please put it down in the comment section in the chat box. We'll be taking up the questions from there, and we'll try to bring it as and when needed. And we'll try to base this discussion around the World Test Championship, the upcoming World T20, and a little bit of questions here and there from IPL as well. So if you guys want to ask anything to Michael, please post down your question to in the chat box, and we'll take that up from there. So Michael, let's start on with the World Test Championship final, a big spectacle. Like India versus New Zealand, it was a great spectacle for cricket fans, and it was called the ultimate test, where New Zealand obviously turned out to be victorious, and it was a really good cricket match. So what's your thought on the World Test Championship final?
Yeah, it was a neat game. I mean, there was a lot in it. The whole thing with the rain, it meant that you sort of thought there was going to be a draw, but then the reserve day came into play, and it looked like there was nothing on, and then New Zealand managed to force something and make it happen. And it was good quality cricket. You really like to see that. You're going into the final day. There's all the options on the table, and that was sort of what we got. New Zealand had a bit of luck, but New Zealand also played really well. And you need to do both to win a test match against a really good team. You've got to play well and have a bit of luck.
Absolutely, totally agreed. And New Zealand, evidently they were the better side, because in a lot of sessions, if we see the sessions by session, if we compare, in a lot of sessions, New Zealand clearly had an edge. So Indian fans, obviously, a lot of disappointment for Indian fans, because I made a couple of videos post the World Test Championship happened, and there were outpouring of emotions, and fans were having a lot of views that there were things that they could have done better, but nothing to take away from the New Zealand side, who were just brilliant on their day. And obviously, a small word, a little bit of we want to discuss a little bit about Kyle Jamieson. He's come of age, he's been a phenomenal player. What do you have to say about Kyle Jamieson?
Oh, look, it was neat watching Kyle Jamieson, because that was different to what we'd seen from him in the past. The fact that he was pitching the ball up and getting it to swing, and he'd been a bang it in bowler mostly before, but now he's moving it around, and it was just a completely new aspect to his game, one that the Indian batsman wouldn't have been able to prepare for, because we'd never seen that from him before. And so that's pretty exciting, and he's turning into a really good prospect. I know Dale Hadley, who was the brother of Richard Hadley, felt that Kyle Jamieson was more promising at the same age than his brother had been. So that's saying something.
That's amazing. That's a really good thing to know. And there's a question that Shobit has posted for us. I'll just take down that question. Is New Zealand team management even clear about the players who are going to play in the World T20? Okay, so we'll take up these questions when we are discussing about the World T20. For now, just a little bit, a few more questions on the World Test Championship. So, New Zealand, if I take like past couple of years, 5 to 6 years, New Zealand have been phenomenal when it comes to the ICC tournaments. Like 2015 World Cup final, again 2019 World Cup final. Though they could not end up, like 2019 was a really unlucky way to not be declared the champions, because you know what happened in the final against England.
Yeah.
So, but still, they have proven their point. They have proven like that they are a quality side who are like really doing well in the ICC tournaments. And with the final victory in the World Test Championship, it is really like a well-deserved victory. So, what do you have to say about their performance in the ICC events, particularly comparing these three finals that they have played recently?
Well, New Zealand always been a semi-final team. Like, we made the semi-finals almost every tournament. I think we've made more semi-finals than any other team. Maybe Australia's made one more than us, but it's we in the history of the Cricket World Cup, we've almost always been in a semi-final, and that's normally been a pretty good effort because we're normally the fifth or sixth or seventh best team there. So making the semi-finals, it's not choking when you lose in the semi-final if you're not as good as the other team you're playing. We'd managed to get there, but this current team with Simpson, McCullum, and Williamson have just got that little bit extra that allows them to go on a bit further. And it wasn't a surprise that New Zealand made the final. I mean, it was tight. There were four good teams, and New Zealand was one of them. And we used a bit. We wouldn't have made the final if David Boone hadn't deducted points from Australia for the slow over rate. It was really it was really tight. But we got there, and then once we were there, it was I was watching the odds for the international bookmakers, and they were all just really close. The whole way through, people just couldn't decide who was going to win. And that's what happened in the games. It could have gone either way. It went New Zealand's way, but we're now good enough that it's not a surprise that we're competitive anymore.
Absolutely. So that's like totally in agreement with that, because all the Indian fans as well, when prior to the final happened, we were absolutely on page that India and New Zealand are placed like 50-50, and they are very, very evenly poised. Like, nobody was writing off New Zealand because the kind of bowling attack they have, everybody was pretty much aware that they can be really, really dangerous on their day. So if India's batting could have been slightly different and they would have been more overpowering, then a result could have gone the other way. But New Zealand were equally good, if not the better team, until the final was played. And obviously in the final, a little bit of luck also going with their way, but not to take away with the kind of performance they have put up, that they deserve that bit of luck, because they were really, really phenomenal in the entire test match. So, and obviously getting a result in 4 days, we had a session after that once the final was done. So we were pretty much thinking that it could also head towards a draw, but getting a result in the 4 day span, it was an absolute joy for the cricket fans for sure. So.
Yeah.
So,
it was only about 4 days worth of play. It was only about 4 days of play. I mean, the thing for me, the big disappointment, I love watching Colin de Grandhomme bat. We didn't get to see that, or didn't get to see it for very long. That was, I would have loved to have seen him hitting the tired bowlers around. We didn't get to see that. Some of there were a whole lot of little things that I would have loved to have seen, but actually, I wouldn't trade anything for this. I did think at the time when it was looking like the final, I thought if it was New Zealand-India, I'd probably back New Zealand to win. If it was New Zealand-Australia, I'd back Australia to win. And if it was Australia-India, I'd expect India would win. I think the teams match up quite like that. We were lucky that we faced India. I don't think we would have done so well against Australia. But who knows? I mean, Kyle Jamieson does change everything.
Absolutely. And not to take away, Neil Wagner has been phenomenal against Australia. So even if they would have been playing Australia, you never know. New Zealand were a team who were really well balanced, and so they definitely had a chance in the final for sure. Shobit has a question for us. We'll take that question. So after the World Test Championship final, is New Zealand aiming for fortress like India and Australia to win? So what do you think, Michael? This question is.
I think it's saying, are we aiming to win in a fortress like India and Australia? Because I think New Zealand is already a bit of a fortress, a pretty hard place for teams to win. Look, New Zealand always would love to win. Every series we want to win. There's no series that we go, oh, well, we're not going to win this one. I think we're the only team that beat Pakistan and UAE. Maybe Sri Lanka's done it since we did it, but at the time we were the only team to have beaten Pakistan and UAE. And that's a fortress that we managed to break down. We've got an interesting thing happening in New Zealand. We've got really good spinners. You wouldn't think that because you don't get to see them, but we've actually got a really good group of spinners. And one thing that's going to happen is now that PJ Watling's retired, who was possibly the best keeper I've seen to fast bowling, but was not very good against spin. Tom Blundell's a much better keeper against spin bowling. And so you may well see the spinners starting to come into the game a bit more. But the likes of Ajaz Patel and Mitchell Santner gets a lot of grief. His numbers aren't great, but he's actually a much better bowler than his numbers present. I think we've got the chance that we can have a pretty good lineup to take on India in India. And we're going to need to because our away tours in this next World Test Championship are England, India, and Pakistan. So we're going to have to be pretty good away from home if we're going to make the final again. But we've got a chance. We've got a chance. Yeah.
That's great to know, and like particularly talking from the spin point of view, it's really great to know that New Zealand have a couple of spinners who are going to dominate in the next couple of years. Because obviously, as correctly said, if we check out the numbers, it does not reflect that New Zealand is one side who can dominate with spin bowling. When it comes to teams like India and Sri Lanka, we see that India and Sri Lanka and a couple of other teams who have really dominated with their spin pack. Even in the different conditions, in struggling conditions also, Ashwin just proved out in the World Test Championship final also, when the pace bowlers were not giving the breakthrough, it was Ashwin who just gave quick breakthroughs, a couple of them. So India has been one team who has dominated.
Ashwin's a magic bowler. Ashwin's a magic bowler. I love watching him do his thing. He's one of my favorite players to watch in the world. I mean, he's just delightful to watch. And the whole way he goes about his game, the way he thinks about it, he's one of my favorite cricketers. But no, I mean, New Zealand have spun out Sri Lanka and Pakistan in Test matches recently. Ajaz Patel has bowled both of those teams out, bowled New Zealand to a victory in those two games. Todd Astle picked up a bunch of wickets against England in a match to win a game for us. Will Somerville as well, who's a very unusual spin bowler in that he's about 7 foot tall or something, and so the ball comes from a very strange angle. So New Zealand have got a whole lot of different things with our spin bowling, and that's something that will, it's easy to sort of think, oh well, it's got to look like this, but off spin is not off spin. It depends how you do it, and so New Zealand's got a bit of variety there. It's something I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes in the next cycle.
That's great. That's great to know, especially from a spin point of view. One thing, just a few things about Kane Williamson, because in India, you'll be surprised to know that he is one player who has a massive fan following and is just growing day by day. Massively, it's growing, and I'm sure about it because after the support that we give to the Indian cricketers, there was Abraham Benjamin de Villiers. AB de Villiers was there, who had a massive fan following in India because the kind of cricket that he played was just loved by the cricket fans. So after his retirement, I'm sure Kane Williamson is slightly stepping into that zone because Williamson is like a Dhoni kind of a demeanor. The personality that he has, it's more like a MS Dhoni kind of a personality. So fans are very easily able to relate to him. And they even in World Test Championship final, I have done a lot of sessions, and I was surprised to see that a lot of people were supporting Williamson to get one ICC trophy. So it was. So what? I want your viewpoint on this. The kind of fan following that Williamson is having in India. I'm sure in New Zealand back, he's a hero and everybody loves him. But what do you think? He's grown in character. He's grown in the kind of cricket he's playing at this moment.
I think probably Rahul Dravid was a better match than MS Dhoni to Williamson. Dhoni was a little bit more lead from the front, demonstrative sort of captain, whereas Dravid was a sit back and think and inspire people to step up through that sort of assured presence was Dravid, and I think that's more what Williamson is in terms of his character. You'd never hear. I would imagine Dravid would be very careful about what brands he endorsed, whereas I felt like Dhoni would, if they were going to give him money, he would be on an ad for it. And Williamson's a little bit like that. He's quite careful about his image. He's quite careful about what he does. but he's also got a very dry sense of humor. So once you understand his humor, he's quite funny, but people don't get it straight away, which is part of what makes it particularly funny for us in New Zealand, seeing people that just don't understand what he's saying. But yeah, so I think Dravid's a better match. But he is. I mean, he's a beautiful player to watch. I mean, you could if you just made a compilation video of his back foot cover drive, I'd watch that for an hour. You know, it's just delightful.
Phenomenal. Yeah, true. And especially like the kind of batting he does against spin bowling, it is like such a joy to watch. Like he's one of the, I think he's the best player of spin. I think for me, like kind of I have seen in the past couple of years, the best player of spin is like, apart from a couple of Indian batsmen, but Williamson is definitely right up there, I think. Yeah,
I think probably I'd actually put him as second best in New Zealand against spin. I think Tom Latham is our best batsman against spin. Williamson has had a bit of an issue against off spin. Well, I mean against Ashwin particularly, but off spinners that turn the ball quite a lot. The off spin that's turning it quite a lot coming into him has caused him some issues. But then look, you know, you've got to get out sometime. So you know, sometimes you see a pattern where there's not actually one there. You know,
absolutely. So we'll take down a few questions which are just being posted as Aditya is telling who is going to be the X factor for New Zealand in the upcoming T20 World Cup. So what do you think? Who could be the X factor? We'll definitely come to the T20 discussion, but we'll take down a few questions. So he's saying who could be the X factor? What do you think?
Look, I think one of the X factor things with New Zealand is that we've got quite a versatile team with quite a lot of different players that can play different roles. I think Devon Conway is. Look, his stats wise, in terms of domestic T20 cricket, are almost identical to Baba Azam, to the point that their average is within 0.01 of each other and their strike rate is within 0.05 of each other or something. Remarkably similar. 50s per match, hundreds or matches per 100, matches per 50. So he's someone who is quite exciting because he scores his runs without really you noticing them. Whereas at the opposite of that is Glenn Phillips and Finn Allen, and Finn Allen's a guy to watch. Big dude, hits the ball a long way. He'd always been a very slow starter when he was playing for Auckland, and then he moved to Wellington, where they've got this amazing coach, Glenn Pocknell, who just manages to bring out. I don't know why he's not coaching international cricket. He's an amazing coach in terms of his ability to bring out the best in players. And everyone that moves to Wellington goes from being a journeyman to being a star. And he's another example. He's gone there and he's learned to hit the ball from ball one and just dominate the bowlers. And people just don't know where to bowl to him because he just he hits it. He just dominates the attack. And it doesn't last for long often, but it doesn't matter. I mean, if you're hitting 50 off 20 balls at the start of an innings, the team's set up for the rest of the game. The other team has to then work really hard to get back into it. And I think so. Finn Allen is the guy who could be the guy to watch at the start of the innings and the end of the innings. Glenn Phillips is just going from strength to strength. So
that's amazing. There's another question who's Osama is posting one question for us. Your thoughts on the Afghanistan cricket team? They are quite tough team nowadays. So like we'll also try to get in with this question. We'll try to get in the mix of the groups here because we clearly see that the two groups have been assigned and one group is clearly being called the like dominant group and the other group not so much, which I am not in favor of. Because like the group that has Australia, England, and South Africa, West Indies, people were calling that group that's slightly a tougher group, and the other group has India, Pakistan, New Zealand, and Afghanistan. So they were naming that group as like slightly easier than the first one. So I'm not in favor of that because clearly the kind of cricket South Africa is playing right now, they can be as good as teams like Ireland and Afghanistan in my view. Because South Africa is not like in that same league of West Indies and England and Australia. So clearly there we have three teams and we have India, Pakistan, and New Zealand on this other side. So this is clearly like a balanced outfit is what I'm thinking. So Osama's question here is Afghanistan cricket team in the group 2, they are placed with New Zealand, Pakistan, and India. So what do you think? Is they can pose a threat in the World T20?
Oh, look, they can. I mean, they're good enough that they can compete. They're not good enough that they'd be favourites. Yeah, like I looked through, I think they've played against India, Pakistan, and New Zealand. They've played 12 matches and lost 11 and had one tie. So they're not at the point yet where you'd say, yeah, they're likely to win. But then also at the point now where you wouldn't say, oh, they're definitely going to lose. They're perhaps like Zimbabwe in the early 2000s or just late 90s, where you'd expect that if you played a 3-match series with Zimbabwe, they'd win at least one. And Afghanistan are probably getting to that point now where you think if there was a longer series, they'd win at least one. But that would be you wouldn't expect them to win a series.
Okay, perfect. Perfectly said, Michael. Yeah, we'll take on one question that Shobit has. It's a pretty lengthy question. It says that New Zealand bowlers with natural ability to swing the ball, like every New Zealand bowler comes and starts swinging the ball, right? It's easy for them. So he's talking about the natural ability of New Zealand bowlers to have a go at the ball and swing it both ways. So what do you think? Is it easier for New Zealand bowlers as compared to the other bowlers, like from different countries?
Well, I don't think there's anything physiologically different about New Zealanders that makes us swing the ball better. but we grow up in conditions where you have a crosswind in most grounds that you play in. You have it's damp. Yeah, it rains a lot in New Zealand, and it's an island, and most of New Zealand is quite a thin island. So Auckland, the shortest point I think is 1.5 kilometres from the east coast to the west coast in Auckland. So it doesn't matter where the wind's coming from, it's a damp wind. A little bit different in Christchurch and Dunedin, but same in Wellington. It's right at the bottom of the island. So if the wind's coming from the east, if it's coming from the southeast, if it's coming from the northeast, if it's coming from the west, and southwest, northwest, all of it's coming from the sea. It doesn't matter which direction it's coming from. So there's always a damp wind happening. And because of that, if you can't swing the ball, you're not going to be successful growing up in New Zealand. If you don't learn to swing the ball as a kid, unless you are amazingly talented, you're probably not going to get very far, or you're really tall. So you get likes of Jacob Oram didn't swing the ball much because he banged it in. And that's what he was 6'8", so it didn't matter. But most of our bowlers learn to swing because that's what works in New Zealand conditions. Yeah, the pitches tend to be slow. That's changed recently, but growing up, the pitches tend to be slow. You don't get much sideways movement from the pitch necessarily. You get it in the air. So if you want to take wickets, you've got to swing.
Absolutely. There's one question that Akash has posed. He's saying that what's your views on England T20 team? Seems like they have a replacement for every single player in the team. So I think for the kind of performance that they have given against Pakistan, I'm sure that has made him give this question. So what do you think? Like, I'm sure they are one of the strongest contenders at the World T20. And the team is quite settled.
I think it's going to be interesting to see England. I feel like they've got a lot of players that are just below dominant skill. Like they've got if you guy that like the third player picked, they've got a whole team full of them. They don't have many guys that are actually good in the middle overs. I think Liam Livingstone's a massive gain for them because he can bat well at number 4 and number 5, and they traditionally haven't done very well down there. But because because they've got 17 counties, everyone opens for their team. So when they come to play international cricket, everyone has their best players at 1 and 2 and 3. Their best players haven't got used to playing down the order. So the big problem with England is that their depth they have a lot of depth in some things. They don't necessarily have the breadth of it, and you can only pick 11 players. So it doesn't matter how many guys you've got that are almost good enough. Yeah.
Sorry to cut it down, but I think in the middle overs, actually the team that they are featuring right now is not the kind of team they'll put up in the World T20 because they'll have players like Ben Stokes and Sam Curran and players like there are a couple of players who are not in that middle order right now, but I'm sure those are the ones who will be taking in charge when it comes to the greatest event. But for now, obviously, Liam Livingstone.
They've got guys that are good at the depth, but the overs from 10 to 15, that's where I think they're going to struggle. They don't have guys that are used to bowling in those sort of overs, batting those sort of overs. And Ben Stokes can do it, but he actually hasn't done it that much in T20 matches that he's been really successful. He's very good in tests, very good in one days, not quite so much. Yeah, I mean, Livingston's the guy who is the star in that zone, and he makes their team a lot better.
Absolutely. And Akash has the same point of view. He said that Livingstone has just announced himself at the bigger stage. So absolutely agreed on that. So one more question that Shubham is posing at us is like, who are the favorites in the T20 World Cup? So with this, we'll try to bring in something like teams like West Indies and India, obviously, and England. They are just quite dominating, and everybody's talking. Like I've had a couple of discussions with the other folks, and everybody's talking about these teams. But people are not putting in New Zealand in that. Like obviously, New Zealand are the dark horse almost all the time when they feature in an ICC event. But I'm not sure why they're not putting up New Zealand as the contenders. Like if you hear like other, I'm sure you must be in discussion with a lot of analysts and a lot of people. They are like talking about West Indies, they are talking about India, everybody's talking about England, but I'm not sure why they don't put New Zealand as the contenders or as the front runners of the trophy. So what's your take on that?
Well, I think the fact that we've got to get past India and Pakistan to get to the semi-finals makes it a bit harder. I think that's a pretty tough run. In UAE, I mean, we know the Asian teams tend to do well in UAE. New Zealand's pool is likely to be India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and possibly Sri Lanka. So you're going to have all of the Asian teams and New Zealand playing in one pool, and then all of the other teams playing in the other one. Now Sri Lanka might end up in the other pool, but it looks to me like there's a reasonable chance. So I think the favourites, the favourite for me is India and Pakistan. I think those are the two favourites. England are probably in the mix, but I think India aren't as good as they're being given credit for. I also don't think West Indies are as good as they're being given credit for. And I think the fact that South Africa managed to beat the West Indies in the West Indies, and South Africa don't look like a great side, but I think they've got the elements there that they could do very well. Particularly the spinners. They've got three good spinners now in South Africa, and they've always got good quicks. Three good spinners make South Africa they're just a bit lacking in the batting. But you've only got to have a couple of guys come off with the bat to mean that you need five good bowlers and a couple of good batsmen. They may find a couple of guys that can bat that can have a good day. And so South Africa, I think, are the dark horse for me for the whole thing. I wouldn't be surprised at all if South Africa won it. But yeah, I think India are the favourite for me. They've just got depth and strength everywhere throughout the whole lineup. The thing they don't have is perhaps the same familiarity with UAE that the other countries have because of not having played international cricket there as much.
Absolutely. So Shubham has a question. So as you're talking about South Africa as being the dark horse and South Africa having a chance at the World T20 event with players like De Villiers and Steyn, Amla, Faf du Plessis, these players gone, the team has really gone through a struggle. And the question posed here is, do you think the racial rules ruined the South African cricket? So you think, what's your take
on this? What a
massive
massive question. All right. Okay. So first of all, I think South Africa are doing the right thing by trying to encourage cricket to grow throughout the whole country, not just in one small pocket. I think something like 90% of South Africa's cricketers came from 6 schools. There's something like that, a huge number came from just 6 or 7 schools throughout South Africa. So they have been they've been competing and playing at that massive level, despite picking only a really small part of their population. So what they're doing is trying to make sure that there's now heroes playing for everyone. Now that might cost them for a couple of years, but I think the option of being able to pick from a broader basically place. One of the things that's happened with New Zealand cricket, just to sort of throw it back to us, though, is in 1989, Adam Perori got picked for New Zealand. He was the very first Māori player, the indigenous people of New Zealand, to play for New Zealand. There'd never been one before, with one possible exception, a guy that was adopted and they didn't know who his birth parents were. He looked Māori, but they couldn't tell, they didn't know. Everyone else that had played for New Zealand had been either Pākehā, like indigenous white New Zealander, or Asian. That's all of, and Adam Perori got picked, and all of a sudden there was a Māori player that other Māori players could look at and go, hey, we could do this too. And so the next few Māori players that came through, a bunch of them were wicket keepers, which is what Perori had done. But then you started seeing some batsmen, some bowlers come through, and it turns out we found out that the Māori, the natural physique turns out to be pretty good for fast bowling. So Shane Bond is Māori, Trent Bolt is Māori, Doug Bracewell is Māori, Daryl Tuffy is Māori. From this pretty small group, we've managed to find a completely different style of player. And I think South Africa, by allowing there to be heroes from different races, and not just all of the team dominated by English and Afrikaner South Africans, are gonna, it's painful now, and they've possibly not done everything right in the way they're doing it. But the idea behind it is absolutely spot on.
That's absolutely a very, very interesting take, Michael, because we have had discussions about this racial system in South Africa and the teams being picked up, especially with the semi-final controversy that happened in the 2015 World Cup final against New Zealand, of course. So that was one thing where Philander was picked up ahead of Kyle Abbott. So we had a lot of discussions.
One thing people don't point out there, they say, oh, they would have won if they had Abbott. Well, maybe, but Philander bowled really well. Steyn was the one that didn't do so well. Now, did he fail because he was black? Well, no, because he is not black. It wasn't the black player that failed. And realistically, picking Philander ahead of Kyle Abbott was not. Yeah, Philander has a really good record against New Zealand. Had a really good record in New Zealand. Kyle Abbott, the times he played against New Zealand, got dealt to by us. So it wasn't like he had that greater record that he was going to come and destroy New Zealand. That hadn't happened in the past, whereas Philander, I think it was a reasonable selection. It wasn't like it was a completely bad one. And it's not like Philander bowled badly. He bowled really well. He was, if they all had bowled like Philander, they would have won the match.
Absolutely. So it's a lot of discussions. I've heard a lot of discussions regarding that thing. But the point of view that you have had right now and you shared with the viewers and all the fans is really interesting, because people will be able to think ahead. That it's not about the present moment itself. It's also about thinking about the future of cricket for South Africa. And I'm sure in the upcoming 5 years or maybe 10 years, we'll see a more dominating South African side, and they can really come at very hard in the formats of Test cricket and ODI cricket for all the other teams. So very, very interesting take, Michael. One question that Ali has posed at us is, does Finn Allen and Guptill open for World T20 for New Zealand, or we can see a different opening pair? So with Devon Conway there, so what do you think? Who could be the opening pair?
Okay, this is, I guess perhaps I would have Colin Munro and Finn Allen. I think Colin Munro is still New Zealand's best T20 batsman. If you look around the world, and I think in the last 12 months, he's averaged 40, maybe 38 at a strike rate of 162, playing in the PSL, the English competition, the New Zealand competition, and the Caribbean Premier League. So playing against top players, some top players, but certainly he's up to play some really good bowling, and he's dominating them. Now, why he's been dropped because he decided to play in the BBL instead of playing in New Zealand. But New Zealand cricket weren't paying him. So for him to stay home to play on the off chance that he got picked was a huge financial risk. I don't think he should be penalised because he chose to take the money to play in Australia. If he'd been on contract, that would be different, but he wasn't on contract. New Zealand cricket didn't offer him a contract, so therefore he had to make the money, and I think it's really unfair that he's being penalised for that. So he's Absolutely who if I was going to pick the team, I would have Conway batting at 3. I would have Munro and Finn Allen. Now that leaves no room for Kane Williamson. And what I'd say there is I think Conway does the same role as Williamson and does it slightly better. So the only reason I'd pick Williamson would be as an extra bowling option. And if the pitch looked like it was going to be particularly dicey, I'd maybe bring in Williamson to open the batting with Munro and drop Finn Allen for those games. Because if it's a difficult pitch, you probably want an extra guy that can rotate the strike. But you generally want a hitter and a rotator, and having you don't want more than 2 guys like Conway and Williamson.
Amazing. That's a very interesting take, and a lot of Indian fans will go through a heartbreak once you said that Williamson's place is at risk, and obviously the captainship also will become a concern in that case. But anyhow, let's quickly move on to the next question. Shubham has a question that where is Jesse Ryder nowadays? So he's retired pretty early, and he was pretty. So what do you think?
Yeah, look, Jesse had some issues, and to be fair, given the background that Jesse came from, he did pretty well to do what he did and to get his life together as much as he had. But he still had made some decisions that were perhaps not particularly helpful in terms of prolonging his career. And so he retired because it was clear that he wasn't going to get picked anymore. And he's now a player coach for a club cricket team in Napier, who are doing pretty well in the club scene. They've been to the national finals a couple of times as the Central District representative. So he's doing all right as a player coach, and it may be that being a little bit more hands off, he might end up bringing out the best in him.
That's it.
He's had some good moments and some bad ones, and hopefully we see more good moments from him in the future.
Obviously, we hope for the best for Jesse. So Rohit has a question for us. Rohit is saying that, what do you think? Where did Team India go wrong with their performance? And they always tend to miss out on the ICC tournaments. So in the past couple of ICC tournaments, obviously past the Champions Trophy victory, I'm sure Team India is struggling a little bit in the ICC events. Nothing to take away with the kind of performances they are giving, but obviously when it comes to the biggest stage, if they are failing in one particular match, obviously that will cause them to be out of the tournament. So what do you think is the reason behind this, that Team India is?
I think perhaps some of it is the incredible pressure that they're on. There is a huge amount of pressure on them for being Indian cricketers, because there's a billion people. Or more than that watching, probably 1.5 in terms of the Indians that are around the rest of the world. So there's a huge amount of pressure and expectation on them. And you saw what New Zealand did in that semi-final, is they didn't attack. They didn't attack India. They just made it difficult. They just made it difficult for them to play and let the pressure do the job. And the pressure told. It was like a dripping tap. There's drip, drip, drip. New Zealand just kept building up the pressure, and then India made mistakes. And it was because I think there's already that psychological pressure on them. Now, how do you fix that? I'm not sure. I mean, the All Blacks were the dominant team the All Blacks in rugby were the dominant team in world rugby for 20 years without winning a single title. Despite winning 95% of matches outside there. India don't have nearly that level of dominance in cricket, and have had better results in semi-finals than New Zealand did. And one of the things they did, they got sports psychologists in and did all sorts of things, and eventually they managed to crack it. But some of it's also, if every team loses the odd match against other good teams, no one's good enough that they can be guaranteed to win. Even the dominant Australian team only won because of that, won some of their matches because of some incredibly good luck they had. No one's good enough that they can dominate everything, and so you shouldn't expect to win everything. And what we can do is we can create narratives out of just random chance. Did India choke in that final, or were they outplayed in the game against Australia in the 2015 World Cup? Was it India played badly, or was it Australia played well? I think that one was Australia played well. And you've got to sometimes say, well, you've got to give the opportunity. You've got to give the opposition credit sometimes. Sometimes it's not that you lost; it's that they won. And sometimes you look at that. The All Blacks lost the semi-final of the last World Cup, and the reason they lost is because England played an amazing game and beat us. It wasn't because of how badly New Zealand played; it was because of how well England played. And sometimes you just got to say that. You got to say the opposition played better.
Absolutely agreed. Perfectly said, Michael. One question Aditya has for us. It's on the 100-ball format that's shortly introduced. And so what are the views on this format? And is this a good decision to take cricket forward?
Well, as I understand it, and I could be wrong on this because I'm not in England, and as I understand it, the decision was made together with the television company that they had a 2.5-hour slot on the TV schedule for that game to fit in. And if the games went up after that, the coverage would just stop and they'd miss the end of the game. So they didn't want that to happen. So they had to cut the time that the innings took down. And if you look at the way they've done it, what they've done is they've taken out some of the bits that don't really matter. You're taking it down to 5 balls. Well, that's neither here nor there. But meaning you're getting less swapping over of fielding positions because you're only changing ends every second over. Does that change the nature of the game? Not really. Does it speed it up? Absolutely. So there's a degree to which that's a really clever way of shortening the game down, speeding it up without really affecting the nature of the game. So I think what they're doing, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. but I think it could actually be the way forward in terms of getting the game to that 2.5 hour length that can fit in with the TV schedules. And if the result of it is more people in England, more kids in England are able to watch the cricket because they don't have the pay TV, but they've got the terrestrial TV, and they're able to watch that, and they end up picking up a bat and ball instead of kicking a football around, well, that's been a good move.
Absolutely. Totally agreed. Like, if we look at the positive side of it, obviously we're able to watch some good cricket. And if it is like, even if we look at the commercial point of view, if they are trying to do it with the kind of time schedules they have had and trying to adjust it, it's not a off thing for a fan. For a cricket fan, it's obviously a joy, because even if we are able to see a 100-ball format cricket, it's absolute joy and win-win situation for all the fans, for sure. One question
and the other
has
thing
for
is,
us,
I would say, just one thing on there.
Sure.
One other thing is that it means the strike rate makes sense. Strike rates don't make sense in T20 cricket. There's 120 balls in an innings. Why are we talking about runs per 100 balls when we should be thinking about runs per 120? But in the 100 match, the strike rate makes perfect sense. It actually gives you an idea as to how much a team would score if everyone batted like that. So that's a good thing.
Absolutely. That's a great point of view. One more question that Shobit has for us is, what is the secret of Kane Williamson being so calm in such crunch situation?
Well, you probably have to ask him.
So, like, there's a sense of calm around Williamson all that with the bat.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that
obviously,
but one of the things that you see, I love the image of a duck sitting on a pond. Now, if you've ever seen it, ducks look so peaceful sitting on a pond, but in order to sit there, they're kicking like furious beneath. And they just manage to look still when they're sitting on the surface. And I think there may be a little bit of that. There's an awful lot going on in his head, but behind the scenes, but what you actually see in the front looks very calm. I'm not sure how calm he actually is, but some people have the ability to just enjoy a game. And it may be that one of the things New Zealand have tried to do is actually play the game like they're playing with their mates in the backyard or in the park. Try and take it out of try and get rid of the sense of occasion of being on the big thing and actually play cricket like they're playing with their friends. And that's been a real focus of New Zealand, and it maybe has helped with that.
Absolutely, totally agreed, Michael. Very nicely pointed out, and it's absolutely true, because we have seen that same kind of situation even with MS Dhoni. A lot of things going around in his head for sure, but it never comes out on his face. Like, behind the stumps, he's trying to keep it calm there. I'm sure that's not the exact situation he is in his mind, because in the mind 100 things are going on, but he can't put it out on the face all the time. So Williamson is a little bit of we can see a little bit of Dhoni in Williamson for sure, because he has that calm demeanor for sure on the field. If we look at Virat Kohli, who's just way too expressive all the time, like even if a small thing goes wrong, you'll be able to see that on Virat's face. But that's not the case with Williamson for sure. And it's actually a good thing also. Like, it's positive, because the other teammates also are there in a sense of calm is also it passed on to the other teammate, and they can also be reflective and play the game accordingly, which is a good thing. One question I have for you, Michael. In all the eras, be it Fleming's era or maybe Brendan McCullum or Williamson has taken over now, in all these eras, if I ask you to choose a couple of New Zealand cricketers who were your favorite, the favorite New Zealand cricketers of all time that you liked the most and who has had a great impact on New Zealand cricket. So if I ask you to choose any three cricketers, so who would you choose?
Okay, the three cricketers that I enjoyed watching the most, I would say number one, without a doubt, is Chris Pringle. He was a slightly above medium pace bowler. He didn't swing the ball a lot. He didn't get a lot of movement off the pitch. But what he did was he managed to figure out what made it awkward for a batsman and bowled the ball there. And he had a great slow ball, his off cutter, to the point where later in his career, he'd bowl 5 slow balls and over and 1 quick one. Because it was such a good slow ball, and the batsman knew it was coming. They still couldn't hit it. He was a master of that. But he was very much the king of the big occasions. He bowled the last over in almost every match. And one match he defended, Australia needed 2 runs to win, and he bowled a maiden. Another one, there's a couple of times that there was 6 runs to win off the last over, and he managed to win the game for New Zealand. It was just that the more difficult the situation was, the better he got. His career only lasted for 5 years, and in that time he managed to have a couple of sex scandals, drug scandal, a number of other scandals. He managed to have pretty much every scandal you can imagine. He managed to get involved in the case of only 5 years, and eventually he just got too difficult for New Zealand to keep picking him. But his career stats in terms of average and strike rate and those things are almost identical to Waka Yunus, despite having just a short career. And so he's one that I'd say he was a guy I really enjoyed watching. A current player that I love watching is Colin de Grandhomme. Just, the way he goes about with the bat in the test match, he just, wait until the bowlers are tired and then he just destroys them. And I loved watching him playing at domestic level. I went to a game at Colin Maiden Park, which is sort of across the road from one of the campuses of a university. It's quite a big ground. It's 2 rugby fields rather than my Eden Park's 1 rugby field. The Colin Maiden's 2 rugby fields next door to each other with the pitch in the middle. And so it's quite a big ground. I saw him hit a ball out of the ground, so over the boundary, over the hill, over the fence, over the road, and over the fence on the other side of the road. I've measured it at about 130 meters on Google Maps. And he just the amount of times that he hit the first ball of a match for 6 when he was opening, or when he was coming in a little bit later on, just the first ball he faced, bang, hit it for 6, and then he just acted as if nothing had happened. Like there was no celebration or anything. Just acknowledgement. Oh yeah. See, I love that. I think he's quite a character. And I guess if there's a third player that I've really enjoyed watching, it's hard. I've got the 2 down pretty easily. Probably growing up was Lance Cairns. I mean, I was pretty young when he was playing, but he was just all about the massive swing. And then when he bowled, probably the most swing I've ever seen from a bowler. He bowled off the wrong foot and just huge hooping in swing. And then when he batted, it was about the big swing too. But that was he just tried to hit everything out of the park at an era when no one else was just trying to hit everything out of the park. And sometimes it came off, sometimes it didn't. He averaged about 14 or something, but they were 14 entertaining runs. So I quite enjoyed him.
That's amazing. That's a very, very interesting pick, Michael. All the 3 picks, in fact, and the explanation, why you like these cricketers. Like you talked about Colin de Grandhomme, we can see a little bit of Grandhomme in Ishan Kishan nowadays. Like he walks out to the field and the first ball, he whacks out of the park. We have seen that in T20s, even in ODI debut, the first ball of his ODI career. Just he told his teammates back in the dressing room that I'm going to hit the first ball for a 6. And he just goes onto the field and he does not care what delivery the spinner is going to bowl. He just whacks it out of the park. So that's an amazing sight for the viewers for sure. And if I was asked to choose, I definitely have one player I really like in New Zealand. That was Shane Bond. So Bond was phenomenal. I have a huge respect. It was in the Sachin and Ganguly era. I was growing up, I've seen Tendulkar and Ganguly and Sehwag dominating world cricket for a long time. But whenever they played New Zealand, Shane Bond was one player who ran through the lineup. The top order, he ran through the top order, and it was a devastating sight for all the Indian fans to see all the batting collapse happen. So Shane Bond was definitely one of the greatest I have seen in New Zealand cricket for sure. We'll take on Aditya has a comment.
Just thinking about that third player again. Rethinking about it, probably Simon Doull would come in instead of Lance Cairns. And Simon Doull was just that ability to swing the ball both ways off the same action that very few players have. And when he could just work out a player, he wasn't fit very often. He was almost always injured. But when he was fit, like Shane Bond, but when he was fit, he was just beautiful. He was one of he was a guy that you just wish was managed to get on the field more often because he was just wonderful to watch. Right, what's that question?
That's amazing. Simon Doull, amazing, and we love to hear his commentary as well. He's been a part of the IPL for sure for a very long time, so it's amazing to hear his commentary as well. Aditya is saying that just say to Michael that he has a very nice beard.
Thank you very much.
Amazing, thanks, Aditya. Shubham is saying that cricket is spreading in countries like Namibia and New Guinea. ICC should include more teams in the World Cup. So what do you think? More teams in the World Cup?
I'm a fan of having more teams in the World Cup. What I'd really like, though, is bring back the ICC knockout instead of the Champions Trophy, which is sort of a bit of a nothing of a tournament. I'd like them to bring back the ICC knockout, and I'd like it to be in ODI cricket, 16 teams, top 16 ranked teams, but a random draw to see who plays who. So no rankings, no protected teams. You might end up with India playing New Zealand in the very first game, or England versus New Zealand, or you might find them on opposite sides of the draw. I think that would be entertaining, and you'd get to see some of those small teams, and there'd be something for them to play for. I've put out. I'd like there to be 16 teams at the World Cup, with the aim of moving to having 20 in 3 or 4 World Cups time. I think there's enough quality. In fact, if you watch the World Cup in New Zealand, the 2015 World Cup, the most entertaining games were ones often involving the minor teams. Scotland-New Zealand was one of the best games that New Zealand played in. Scotland really gave it to us, and it was a great game. The Ireland versus Pakistan, outstanding match. Ireland-Zimbabwe was a wonderful game. There was some really good cricket there. Scotland-Afghanistan was probably the best game of the whole tournament. And we've done away with those games by shoveling them off to a qualifying tournament. And the qualifying tournament was great, but it wasn't covered very well. They didn't have good cameras, and they didn't have DRS, and it was a disappointment that we could have had so much better options. I'd also like to see regional tournaments. I'd like to see New Zealand playing against Fiji and Samoa and Papua New Guinea and Vanuatu and in the Oceania competition. I'd like to see that. The Asia Cup is a great concept. I think there should be a European Cup. Probably the Americas are a bit hard to do at the moment because West Indies are so far ahead of the others. But you've got West Indies, Canada, United States, and Bermuda. That's 4 teams. You can have a tournament there, and if you start playing more often, those other teams are going to get better. You saw Hayden Walsh Jr. doing so well for West Indies now. Wouldn't it have been good if he was still able? If there was a pathway for him to keep playing against the top teams playing for the United States, he didn't have to switch his allegiance. He never had that. He didn't have that opportunity playing for the United States, so he had to switch to the West Indies. But wouldn't it be good if he could have stayed there?
Absolutely. So shifting a little bit, Michael, towards the IPL. So I'm sure you have followed the IPL 2021 up till now. Midway it stopped in, again going to resume in September-October season. So who is your favorite IPL team? Which is the team that you like the most?
I followed Sunrisers Hyderabad. And I've got to admit, this is something as very strange as a New Zealander saying, but there's 2 reasons I follow them. One of them is David Warner. I really enjoy watching David Warner bat, and it's nice to be able to cheer for him instead of despise him because, as an Australian, I never want him to succeed. But when he's not playing for Australia, it's fine to cheer for him. And the other thing I liked is that when they had Khan Sharma and Priyash Chawla playing for them one year, and they just 2 such different leg spinners that I was a leg spinner when I was playing, and I bowled a bit like Priyash Chawla did with using sort of out the front of my hand more than the Australian style flicking the wrist. So I really liked seeing that someone could the way that I bowled, that maybe it was possible to actually be successful, whereas I never had the success. But I sort of lived vicariously through Chawla that think that someone used my technique and actually managed to make it. It wasn't impossible to succeed doing what I did. I just wasn't good enough. So I quite enjoyed watching him play. And I think the bowling lineup's changed a few times, but that's why I started following them. Look, the IPL is going to be really interesting to see how it goes when it picks up because, tournaments, there's a momentum to them and there's a life cycle. And when there's a break, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I'm not sure if this is going to be, if the second half of it's going to be anything like the first half at all.
Absolutely, and totally agreed with the new sides, like teams like RCB doing so well in the first half of the tournament, and then a break could just spoil their momentum. This could also be the key. Even the fans, they were glued to the televisions when the IPL started in, and now with the break, with World T20 happening, After that, again, the IPL resuming, I'm not sure if the interest is going to be the same level, but I'm sure towards the crunch end, towards the semi-finals and the finals, it will definitely be a very interesting, a very interesting thing to see which team qualifies and which team just leaves a mark again this season for sure. One last couple of questions, Michael. Then we'll try to wrap up this session. So it's been an absolute talk. It's been an absolute amazing session with so much interesting point of views that you have had on New Zealand cricket and the world cricket. So last couple of questions. Who's your favorite cricketer among the current lot? All the teams are taken together. So which cricketer you think, one or two cricketers you like the most in nowadays teams? Cricketers you enjoy watching the most?
I really enjoy watching Virat Kohli. I enjoy watching David Warner. I enjoy Kieron Pollard. So those are three guys I quite enjoy watching. And as a former spin bowler, not a very good one, but that's what I did. I quite enjoy watching the subtlety of some of the like Ashwin, just delightful. And when Kuldeep Yadav and the Kulchar, those two belong together, just delightful watching the variations. This new spinner, Hasaranga from Sri Lanka. I like what he's doing. The bent front leg, so he gets the ball down really low and skids it into the batsman. Completely opposite to what most leg spinners are doing. But I like what he's doing there. It's good.
Absolutely. One question that Shubham has for us is Brendan Taylor the most underrated cricketer? So what do you think? Brendan Taylor, underrated?
Well, I mean, yeah, is he underrated? Probably. I mean, he's a very good cricketer, and I think most people acknowledge that he's a very good cricketer. Possibly the most underrated? I'm not sure. I think there's very good cricketers that no one's heard of, whereas most of us know about Brendan Taylor. I saw him score an amazing century in a game. Probably the best innings I'd ever seen from Kane Williamson, batting first against Zimbabwe. New Zealand were in a bit of trouble when he came in. He scored 100 off 50. I think it was 100 off exactly 50 balls. He had hit 7 off the last ball of the game. He was on 93 facing the last ball. Now, how do you get a century from there? Well, the bowler bowled a no ball, he hit it before, and then he hit a 3 off the last one to get a century. But he only got 42 runs and boundaries, despite being a 50-ball century or something like that. He did it all by hitting twos and hitting the gaps and running. And, it looked like he'd set New Zealand up for a win. And then Brendan Taylor just came out and absolutely blitzed us. Scored 140 off like 80 balls or something, and the game was all over. So when he's on, he's magnificent to watch. But, I don't know about the most underrated, because I think most people are aware that he's a really good player.
Absolutely. And we've seen some really quality knocks from Brendan Taylor for sure. Nicholas just joined us. He's just one question he's posing us: what could be the New Zealand playing 11 for T20 World Cup? So the entire playing 11 could be a difficult guess.
Okay. So here's what I'm thinking. New Zealand are going to go with 2 spinners. So they'll be Sodhi and Santner. They'll have Ferguson or Milne, and I'd say probably Ferguson will be the fast bowler, the enforcer, the middle overs fast bowler. Trent Boult and Tim Southee are the likely opening bowlers. So there's your 5 bowlers. Then you'd have the all-rounder will probably be Jimmy Neesham. But in those conditions, maybe it will be Colin de Grandhomme instead. Are you still there? Stream seems to have died. Well, I'm going to talk in case it's still going. All right, are we still going? It seems to be breaking up.
Still live.
Right. Okay. So then, in terms of batting, now we've got Phillips, Conway. Phillips, Conway will certainly be there. Phillips and Conway will certainly be there. I think Williamson's probably going to be there. I think Finn Allen's going to be there. I think Tom Latham is probably going to be the wicket keeper, or maybe Tim Seifert will be the keeper. One of those two will be the keeper. And so that's pretty close to your lineup. So with Jimmy Neesham at number 6 or Colin de Grandhomme at number 6. I personally think higher up the order is better for Colin de Grandhomme, but Glenn Phillips is doing so well at number 4 that you wouldn't want to move him. So I think that's probably the lineup. You'd say Allen and Conway opening, Williamson at number 3, Glenn Phillips at number 4, Tom Latham at number 5, or maybe they might go for Jimmy Neesham at number 5. And then you'd have the other one of those two. Then you'd have Southey, Santner, Ferguson, Sodhi, Bolt, and there's someone else that I mentioned that I can't think of who I said there. Possibly, but possibly Doug Bracewell as well. I mean, Doug Bracewell's been probably New Zealand's best late order hitter in domestic cricket. He's also a pretty handy bowler. So if you had him as your 6th bowling option and also as a hitter, that'd be pretty handy. I see the question up there: does New Zealand lack a good finisher? No, I don't think New Zealand lack one.
So one player. Sorry to cut you, Michael. Just one player you didn't name in the playing 11, and it's a really happy news for all the Indian fans, because when India play New Zealand, and if they don't see Kyle Jamieson in there, we'll be really happy.
Yeah, I think Kyle Jamieson's not quite got his game right for T20 yet, and particularly playing in UAE, I'm not sure that it takes a special skill set to play on those pitches, and I'm not sure that he's got that. But you never know. I mean, I didn't think he would go that well in England, and he dominated there. So who knows?
Absolutely. So Nikhil's question of New Zealand lacking a quality finisher. So you think Grandhomme and Neesham can take up that job?
I think Neesham certainly. I think de Grandhomme's much better when he comes in early. I think he's actually not a very good finisher. He's good when he's got a really clear head and is just able to hit the ball and not worry about the strike rate or anything, just play the ball on its merits. I think Neesham's good. Doug Bracewell's really good at that. Mitchell Santner's underrated in that role because he doesn't hit big many 4s and 6s. He's still, when he's playing at the death, still at a strike rate of over 200. So, but he does it by working the ball around. So he's someone who I think is underrated in that role. But no, I don't think New Zealand. And Glenn Phillips is phenomenal at that role. So I don't think New Zealand lack in that department. And I've lost you.
And
No.
Am I audible?
Okay, I think I've got you back now.
Okay. So just last one or two.
Okay, I can't actually hear anything that you're saying. So I think we may have.
I think we'll take that up. Shubham is saying that Pakistan.
Okay, I don't know if you can hear me. I'm going to answer. I can see the question on the screen. Pakistan wants to hold 5 World Cups in the next 10 years. Is it possible? Well, there aren't 5 World Cups in the next 10 years. I think that maybe host a World Cup in the next 10 years. I'm not sure.
Michael, am I audible? Or did I lose
you've come back now.
connection?
I've got you back now.
Oh,
all right.
Absolutely sorry for that. Okay. So just last one or two questions, and with that we'll try to wrap up. Nikhil is saying that Pakistan is trying to host the 5 World Cups in the next 10 years. It's possible that Pakistan could be hosting a World Cup. Seems very unlikely. So what's your take on this?
Well, there aren't going to be 5 World Cups in the next 10 years. I think Pakistan are making some good steps in terms of the safety and security, but they've got a lot of off-field issues that are going to make that very difficult to do. And I feel for Pakistan cricket because it's not their fault. It's not. They can't control the socio-political stuff going on. So.
Absolutely. Totally agreed. Nikhil's last question will take. We Indian fans only fear New Zealand now out of all the teams. So obviously with last couple of outings that we have had, especially in the World Cup semi-finals knockout and post that the World Test Championship final. So it could be true that next time we face New Zealand in any ICC event, it could be a sense of fear going in the Indian fans' head.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think New Zealanders look to Australia and we think, oh no, not Australia, and they tend. I mean, the other one that South Africa just belt us every time we play them. It's just we go and play South Africa and we get destroyed. It's just embarrassing. And there are teams that match up well against other teams. I think New Zealand matches up really well against India at the moment.
Absolutely. But when New Zealand plays South Africa in the ICC event, I'm sure most of the times New Zealand come out victorious, because other time in ongoing series or stuff.
We certainly have in the knockout matches. I don't know if we've done so well. I can think of a couple of pool games that have gone either way. But yeah, we have actually done pretty well against South Africa in the ICC tournaments. You're right there.
Absolutely agreed. In knockout stage, I've seen a couple of games. That's why I remember South Africa being knocked out because of New Zealand. And now same has become the feat for Indian team. They are getting knocked out because of New Zealand. So that's perfect. Rohit's last question. He's just saying that your thoughts on Indian board fielding two teams, one playing in England and the other playing at against Sri Lanka. So you think this is the good concept going forward for Indian cricket?
Yeah, look, I think New Zealand have done it as well fairly recently, where we had a clash of things, and so we sort of had a Test team and a T20 team playing not quite simultaneously, but we had managed to have only one player, I think, crossing over from one to the other. One player quickly, as Tim Southey, quickly rushing from one to the other. The rest of the teams were separate. So I think it's a case where the best teams can do it, but there's also the skills are quite different between the different formats now, and so there's very few players who play all formats, and there's enough depth in India and New Zealand and England and probably Australia that we could field the few players that play both formats. There's normally someone who the Test and T20. There's normally someone who can do almost as good a job at one of those things. New Zealand not quite there with our batting, but we're certainly with our bowling. We could probably field a second lineup in the short form without using any of our frontliners.
Absolutely, Michael. So it has been an absolute honor to host you on our channel and to have this wonderful session where we could discuss a lot about cricket, so much of insight and so much of in-depth analysis in terms of New Zealand cricket especially, and all your views were really amazing. I'm sure it would be a treat for all the fans who watch this video who can understand. So thank you so much for coming up, Michael, on our show. And going forward, I'm sure this is not the last time that you're on our show. I'm sure when India will play New Zealand in the World T20 or any other game, we'll definitely try to get you back again once so that we can have a discussion about it. So it's been a really great honor. Your last words, you want to say anything?
Oh, look, thanks for having me. It's really neat to be able to get a chance to just chat cricket, because it's not, let's be fair, it's not much better than just having a good chat about cricket, is there? Absolutely. Totally agreed. And thank you so much once again to all the people who have joined us. Thank you so much for putting up such wonderful questions for Michael. And thank you so much for watching the entire session. Any other questions or any other thoughts you have, you can put down in the comment sections. We'll definitely try to get answers from Michael regarding that as well. And thank you so much for joining us today. Please do and please do subscribe to the channel so that whenever we do next video, we'll be notified about it and you can come back and watch us on our channel. Thank you so much to Michael once again for coming on our show, and we'll definitely try to get him back again. I promise to all the viewers that he'll be back once again in the coming future for sure. Thank you so much for till now from India and us from New Zealand. We'll say bye to all the viewers. Bye, Michael. Thank you so much for joining us. See you later. Bye.
See you. Bye.